Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti. I am MrPhotographer.com. In this video, I'm going to show you how you could use On1 Photo RAW 2019 to process your image into black and white so you could have an image that looks like this and make it look like this. Moving forward, I decided to do something a bit different with the series. Instead of doing a cold clinical video where I demonstrate a specific tool or a specific effect that is found in On1 Photo RAW 2019, I've decided to do a series of videos demoing my workflow for different types of images. For example, in this video, I'm going to demonstrate my workflow for a black and white landscape image. In our next video, I'll demonstrate my workflow for a color landscape image. In future videos, I'll demonstrate my workflow for a portrait, my workflow for a sky replacement, and so on. In doing these videos, I think I'll be able to cover all the tools, how you would use them in a real-world situation, and most of the effects. That way, I think it will give you a better understanding of when the tools come in handy, when they could be used, and how to use them instead of that cold clinical method where I would just demonstrate a tool in a video or demonstrate an effect in a video. Now, I mentioned in this video, we're going to be demonstrating my black and white workflow for a landscape image. We're going to be working on this image. It is a little underexposed, but it is underexposed on purpose because I didn't want the sky to blow out. And one thing I've been doing differently with my last few videos is that in the description below the video, you'll find all my gear, camera settings, and exposure info. So if you're wondering what camera I used, lens I used, what focal length it was shot at, where I focused, where I took exposure, what my f-stop was, what my shutter speed was, all that stuff is going to be listed in the description below the video. So we're going to work on this image. I start out in the develop module. Now, I'm pretty sure my workflow is kind of unique to me. It's not necessarily right or wrong. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do this. And I encourage you to experiment and come up with a workflow that works for you. Maybe a different YouTube teacher's workflow is best for you. So if by all means, do whatever works for you. What I suggest you do, if you like something I do, take it. If you like something someone else does, take it. And then if you like something you do, take it. Kind of blend it all together and come up with something that's uniquely you. Now, what I'll do is I'll work on this image from beginning to end. We're going to start out in the develop module. And what I like to do, no matter what application I'm using, is I really like to crop first. I like to look at the image as I envision it being. This is kind of a sloppy composition. It's not really that tight. So I want to tighten up the composition. So I'm going to go to the crop tool, click on the top tool in the tool well. And when I do that, you can see the rule of thirds grid comes on. And I'm going to use the rule of thirds for this image. At the top of the tool attributes, I want to keep the original ratio. You can see on the drop down we have different ratios, or we could do a freeform crop. I want to keep that original ratio. The original ratio was 2:3. It is level. I mean, it's a sloping hillside, so it's level enough. I don't need to worry about leveling it, anything like that. I just want to tighten up the crop. I want to get rid of the road over here on the far right, and I'd like the barn to be at this rule of thirds intersection point. So I'm simply going to go to the right-hand side where this middle handle is and pull that in. And just pull it in so that the barn is on this rule of thirds point. Now I can then click on the image and drag it around a little bit to try to better fit it where I want it to be, but I think right there is good. And when I'm satisfied with the crop, I'm just going to click apply. So I crop the image. Now I'm going to jump right over and do tone and color next. Now, usually what I'll do is I'll decide on a profile now. And I really do like the On1 standard profile, but I'll go right and I'll just hover over each of the profiles underneath the On1 standard profile and see if there's something there that I like better. Now, the thing is, I'm going to be processing this in black and white. So, to me, the profile right now doesn't matter as much because there's a lot of tools, especially in the black and white filter or effect we're going to be using, that really will be able to mimic a lot of these different contrasty looks or these, more saturated looks, even though it's going to be ending up being in black and white. So for this image, because it's going to be black and white, I'm just going to leave it an On1 standard. Also, what I like doing is if I'm going to be processing an image into black and white, is I like to go to the saturation slider right now and just bring it all the way down. I want to look at my image in black and white, similar to the same way I wanted to look at my image cropped right away. I want to look at it in black and white right away. So I am going to convert it to black and white in the effects module, but for now, I'm just going to keep saturation all the way down so I could look at it and see what I'm dealing with. Next, I'll look at the image and see what does it need the most. Well, it's pretty dark, right? But really the shadows are most dark. The highlights in the sky aren't too bad. So instead of just jumping right to exposure, I'm going to go to shadows and I'm going to open up shadows up. And you can see as I do that, wow, big difference, right? So that was a definite problem with the image and fixed right away. Next, I'll go up to highlights and I'll bring those down a little bit, just to kind of flatten out the image a little bit. I'm going to end up adding contrast and whatnot to it later. I'll mess with midtones, but tell you the truth, with On1 Photo RAW 2019, I don't move the midtone slider too much. In this case, I'm just going to move it a little bit to the right, maybe. Kind of made it a little more flat. Next, I'll get a white or black point. I do it in a very specific way, and I've talked about it in other videos. I hold the J key in. J is in Jack. And then I'll click on the whites slider and move that to the right. And when I see red coming through, that means I'm starting to clip the highlights. When you clip the highlights, that means you're losing all detail. I like to have detail in the highlights, so I'm going to back that off so the red is all gone in the sky. I still have a little bit of red in the dome of that silo, but that's okay. That's silver, so that's pretty bright. So I'm going to leave that as is. Then I'm going to go down to the blacks slider and hold the J key in, click on the black slider, move that to the left, and you'll see blue comes through. Now I'm starting to clip the shadows, or I'm crushing the shadows. That means there's no detail left when you get that blue come through. Well, I like those. I do like a little bit of black in my image. That's just the way I do it. It's not like the right way to do it. It's just the way I do it. I like to have a little bit of absolute black in the image because I feel it gives my image more tonal depth. So, come up with something that works with you. Maybe you'd prefer your whites to be clipping a little bit and your blacks not to clip. Whatever works for you and your images. So that's fine. I don't like to add structure or haze here. I would prefer to do that with the effects module, so I'm not going to do anything here. Now what I am going to do, and this might sound kind of weird, is I will go to temperature and tint. Even with saturation all the way down, you're going to see that temperature and tint will affect the image. Especially temperature is going to affect the sky. If you look up here where the sky was blue, if I move the temperature slider to the left, you'll see that the sky gets a little lighter. Move it to the right, it gets darker. So you can see, and it is affecting the grass as well, but it's being a little bit more dramatic with the sky. So I'm going to move it to the right a little bit. And then I'm going to go to the tint slider and move that around and just see what that does. And that's kind of brightening up everything a little bit when I move it to the left, it seems, and making everything a little darker when I move to the right. So I'm just going to kind of balance that out right there. I think I'm done with the tone and color slider. Now I don't like, as you know from my previous videos, I don't like to do sharpening and noise reduction in the develop module. I prefer to do that in the effects module, mainly because I have the advantage of using a mask. I'm not so sure this image needs a mask, but I am going to just turn that off and not do it at all. I am going to do the lens corrections and leave that on. Transform's not needed in this image. I'm going to jump back up to tone and color now, and I'm going to reset the saturation slider right back to the middle. So now it looks really ridiculous, but that's all right. We're going to convert it to black and white in the effects module. So I'm going to jump over to the effects module, and I'm going to give you my workflow, and this is truly what I do. I usually then just look to see if I have a filter I like, or I'm sorry, a preset that I like that will give me the look I want. It saves a lot of time. I always go to my presets because I prefer my presets. Many of you know I sell presets for On1 Photo RAW 2019, a pack of 50 presets. They're just effects presets. They'll only put effects on your image. They don't do anything in the develop module. So I would go to, they're in third-party presets, and I would go to my preset pack, and I would try a preset like drama in the sky, and I'd just click on it and see, well, I don't care for that one. Then I'd go to, let's say, boredom. I really like that one. And I probably would maybe then just tweak this, tweak the vignette probably on this, and then I'd be done. Of course, that doesn't help you. So I'm going to reset this, get rid of those two filters that were on there. So obviously in this video, I won't do a preset, but that is my workflow. That is what I do. So I will now add the black and white filter to this. So I'm going to go to add filter. I'll do that right away. So I'll go to the black and white filter, and now we have our black and white image left. Now, along the top, there are the filter presets, and we have green, yellow, red, and infrared filters that you could put on the image to see what it looks like. I prefer to just go right to the drop down and then hover over each of the choices. You'll notice in the drop down, red, yellow, red, and infrared are there as well. Now I would just hover, and like I don't like Adele. I don't like, well, blue's okay actually. Chrome is horrible. Coffee. I don't like tinted black and white images usually. So I'm not into the sepia toned, the cyanotype, things like that. I don't care for those as much. So I would just hover over these and see what I come up with. Tell you the truth, what I usually like is orange or red. So I would jump right down to orange, kind of like that, or red. Now usually, I kind of like orange, but in this case, I'm not going to pick any of these right now because I'd rather show you what the sliders actually do that these affect. What these actually will do is move these sliders around. So we're not going to do any of those. Okay, so we're going to reset this. I don't know how I got set on that. So there's two different types of conversions involved in the black and white filter. The first and obvious one here is the color response, and we have the different sliders here for color response. What these sliders do is in the color image, you could affect the luminance level of those colors. For example, we know that in the sky we had blue, right? Blue sky. If I go to the blue slider and move it to the left, you'll notice whatever was blue in the color image will get darker. See how the sky's getting darker? If I move it to the right, whatever was blue in the image will get brighter. So you can see blue is affecting the sky. So this is one way you could adjust the different tones in your image. This targets the colors that were in the color image, and it will make them brighter or darker. And in the black and white image, since you have no color, it's just making the tonal values change. Another way you could do this is with the channel mixer. This is a little simpler. It's just a single slider, and you just kind of move it around. You could see how it's changing tonal values throughout the image. So you could kind of try to get this where you like it. Like the filter, I kind of like it right towards the left. Now this, you don't have as much control over this. You may find that at this point, well, I really like what it did to the sky, but the grass looks horrible. And over here, well, I like what it did to the grass, but I don't like what it did with the sky. Well, there's not much you could do about it. So that's why I prefer to use the color response side of things. Now there is an eyedropper here. If you want to target a very specific tone in the image, click on the eyedropper. Your cursor will turn into the bullseye or plus sign. Go to a tone you want to affect. Let's say we want to affect this blue sky. Click with the left mouse button and hold the left mouse button in. And when you do that, you'll see that your cursor turns into that horizontal double arrow. That's kind of prompting you to slide your mouse to the right or to the left. If I start going to the right, you're going to notice that the blue slider on the far right hand side is moving to the right. So I'm making that blue sky, or what was blue in the color image, brighter. If I move it to the left, it's going to move that slider to the left. And you can see I made that blue sky darker. So this is a way you could target very specific parts of your image. If you're not sure what color that grass is, click on the eyedropper. Then click on the grass. Hold the left mouse button and drag. You'll notice the yellow sliders moving. So I'm making the yellow grass, or the grass, brighter in effect. So that's something you could do. Or you could just come in and move the sliders. Usually what I like to do is you'll notice yellow will affect grass more so than green. So I like to make the grass brighter in my images, just the way I like doing it. But I like to make whatever is green a little darker. And you notice this will more affect parts of the grass and the trees. So I'm going to kind of move those at extremes. It's giving me a lot of tonal depth now. I have the parts of the grass that are really bright, and then I have parts of the grass that are relatively dark. So I like that. It gives you more variance. Let's see. Red should probably affect the barn, right? So let's move it to the right. You can see it's affecting the barn a little bit, the grass a little bit too. But I'm going to make that a little brighter. It's not really affecting the sky much, a little bit, but not too much. Aqua should affect the sky, right? Because there's blue up there. Move that down a little bit. Blue down a little bit. Make that darker here. Give us a little more tone variations. I don't think anything's magenta in the color image, right? So that's not doing anything. So once you have those adjusted, you may find that you need to touch up the actual shadows, highlights, blacks, whites, and so on in your image. Instead of jumping back to the develop module to do it, you could do it right here. Just roll down this expose triangle, and you have those controls here. So we could come in and get a new black point if you want, get a new white point, and so on. I don't think it needs too much right here. Now you could add detail here, but I don't like this detail slider. It's like all or nothing, meaning let's say we're on like 0 or near 0. You just start moving to the right, it's like not enough, not enough, not enough. Oops, too much. It's like really touchy in my opinion. So personally, I don't care for that detail slider and I won't do detail here. I'll add a different filter for that. Next we have toner. This is split toning. Those of you familiar with split toning, you could give the highlights a specific color, like a little bit of a tone, color tone to them, color tint to them. You could give the shadows a different color tint to them. I prefer not to do that. I like straight black and white, so I'm not going to do that. You could add film grain here. Give it a simulation of a specific type of film. You do that by going to the drop down, picking the film you want to use, like Ilford Delta 3200. And when you do, you could see we now have grain. And when you do that, actually, you could then come down with the amount slider and move it around to change the amount of grain you're getting and the size of the grain. So really large grain to really small grain. Now, personally, I'm not into film grain, so I'm going to keep that at none. So I'm actually done with the black and white filter. I kind of like that. So far, so good. Now, I still want to do some more to the image. Usually at this point is I'll do noise reduction. It's always good to do noise reduction early in your workflow. In this case, there really isn't much noise in this image. There isn't any noise in the image, actually. I think I probably shot this at the lowest ISO of the camera. Again, all that info will be listed below in the description or in the write-up below this video. But if I was, I would then do that. So I would go to Add Filter, and I'd go to Noise Reduction. And usually what I do is I'll zoom in, and I'll pick the subtle and see if it's working. If not, I'll pick strong. And then between those two, I'll usually settle on one and then kind of tweak the sliders. For example, if strong is way too much, I'd go to subtle, but if subtle isn't quite enough, I'd click on that and then I'd move this luminance slider to the right a little bit and see if it did, what I want it to do. Then what I would do is zoom back out and I'd zoom in a spot of detail and I'd make sure that I'm not softening the detail too much by turning this whole filter on and off. So there's off, there's on. So in this case, it's fine. There wasn't really much noise here. But in my real workflow, I would do noise reduction early in the workflow. Next, I often add dynamic contrast to an image, but it's been my experience that dynamic contrast on a black and white image sometimes just doesn't look right. Dynamic contrast is still one of my favorite filters, but when I add it, sometimes it just overdoes it, even at natural. And you could come down here and you could pull down each slider, or you could move opacity down a little bit. But in this case, I kind of like what it did to the sky, but I really don't like what it's doing to the grass. The grass just looks a little bit too, too sharp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mask to this. Now I covered this in previous videos. We'll just click on the mask. I'm going to invert the mask so that the effect isn't there. But I am going to paint in the effect with a brush. I'm going to keep feathering at 50, opacity at 100. I'm going to get a very large brush by hitting the right bracket key because I just want to go through the large swath of sky all at once. And come down and let the feathering of the brush kind of feather out the effect onto the top of the hillside there and the top of the barn and so on. I'm going to go down here this little mask icon and click on that so I could see what I did. And what I could then do, if I found that I went a little bit too much, go to the paint out mode, get a smaller brush in this case, get a left bracket key, and then come in here and kind of paint it out there. Something like that. Now I am feathering, so that's good. I could jump back into paint in and better come in here. So I could get, of course, the perfect brush. Click that, and that might help me better stay in the tree line as well. So that's fine. I think that's good enough. You're not going to see the difference. I have the opacity at 66%. I'm going to turn the mask overlay off by clicking on this little rectangle there. So there is before, there's after. Just a very subtle. I'm not sure you even could see it in the video, but there's before and after. Now, let's see the total before. There's before. Oops, sorry, there's before and there's after. So you see we've come a long way. Next, I'm just going to add a vignette. I'm going to go to Add Filter, and I'm going to go down to Vignette. And usually with the vignette, I go between strong and big softy and kind of adjust it from there. So I'll click on big softy, see what it looks like. That doesn't look too bad. Or then I'll go to, let me go back to view over here. Then I'll go maybe to strong. Kind of like strong a little better, but I am going to back it off a little bit, or maybe just change the brightness. So I'm going to make it a little brighter. I'm going to move this to the right a little bit. Do a before after. I often do this with the vignette to see what it looks like. I think it seems to be a little bit, even though it's right in the middle, it seems to be darkening the left a little bit too much for my liking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this tool right here. And when I do that, my cursor again will turn into the plus sign. I'm going to hold the shift key in. This is where I could place the center of the vignette. But I'm holding the shift key in when I do it, and I could drag it around. And I'm going to skew it a little bit more lower and to the left, so that it darkens more of the top of the image and less of the bottom of the image, and darkens more of the right image and less of the left of the image. And I think that looks better. There's before and there's after. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm done. There is a total before and a total after. Now again, there really isn't any right or wrong way to process an image. This is the way I do it. Hopefully this gives you some tips, some ideas on how you could process your image in black and white and see what you come up with. Again, in the description below the video will be all the camera settings, the gear I used, and the exposure info for this shot. Thank you, everyone that watches my videos. I truly do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.